12 police officers in Northern Ireland have been left injured after a second night of violence in Belfast, sparked by a violent stabbing in the city on Monday. Riot police used water cannon after coming under sustained attack from a group throwing bricks, bottles and pieces of wood at a major roundabout to the northwest of the city. Men dressed in black, wearing face coverings, had been trying to reach a hotel used by asylum seekers. Police say 16 people have been arrested. Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary Hilary Benn's been speaking to the BBC. He says ethnic minorities have been left terrified by the riots, with people being burnt out of their homes because of the colour of their skin. The family of the victim in the knife attacks appealed for calm. Well, our first report this hour comes from our correspondent in Belfast, Dan Johnson.
Northern Ireland witnessed disorder on the streets for a second night running. This was Glengormley, to the north of Belfast. Lines of riot police battled for hours to hold back a crowd which was trying to reach a hotel housing refugees, just one of a number of addresses on a so-called hit list circulated online of target locations linked to immigrants.
Here we've seen this crowd throwing bricks and rocks at the lines of police officers. There have been some bottles and stones that have come over, so that's why this line of police officers has been advancing towards the crowd, trying to drive them back. There are more officers coming in just at the moment, more reinforcements arriving. They've managed to push this crowd around this road and back into that community.
This is what was feared, what people were urged to avoid. It was localised, not on the same level as the previous evening, not with the same immediate impact, but still a huge challenge for the police and a threat to peace in these communities.
The fear had been all day that this would happen again, that it may escalate further. There is still a chance of that, but there are definitely more officers on the streets tonight. They appear to be more heavily armed and ready to deal with this, and the message seems to be that they're not going to tolerate the sort of disruption and disorder that played out last night, causing so much damage to people's homes.
The appeal for calm again came from the family of the victim of the knife attack which sparked this off. They said, "We have witnessed a lot of false information circulating on social media, which is now forcing us to clarify that our loved one is in fact in a stable condition. We have been left feeling disgusted by the scenes that unfolded across Northern Ireland in the wake of what happened. We have many migrants who make a deeply valuable contribution to our country," they said. The vast majority of political leaders have condemned the violence, while some have sought to explain what is driving this unrest, referring back to the awful knife attack here on Monday evening.
I'm not going to speak for those who are engaged in violence, but there are those who do want to express their concerns around immigration. And what we had on Monday night horrified people. It was a medieval savage attack that took place, and the information that the police have provided to us was by an individual now arrested.
It wasn't widespread, but again, a few hundred demonstrators were able to stand up to the police and damage property. There is a short-term question about how much more destruction we'll see, and a longer-term issue of the concern these rioters profess to hold about immigration, its impact on crime and communities. Politicians are saying they'll engage in that debate, but not under the threat of continued violence. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Belfast.
Well, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Hilary Benn, has been speaking to the BBC. He's condemned the violence as racist thuggery. He's been speaking to my colleague Justin Webb on the Today programme.
Yeah, this is described in this morning's Times, the headline, "A modern-day pogrom." Is that a fair description, do you think, of the last 2 days?
Well, I think the two conversations you've just had really do convey the sense of terror and fear felt by the ethnic minority people living in Northern Ireland as they've witnessed, particularly the scenes on Tuesday night of people being burned and intimidated out of their homes because of the colour of their skin. And I really want to echo what the councillor you were just speaking to said, that this is not the true face of Northern Ireland. This is a wonderful, welcoming place, and the eyes of the world are upon us. And that's why there is a very great responsibility on everyone who has any influence over those who are doing this to get them to stop, because there is no justification whatsoever.
And you are clear, are you, in your mind, from the government's perspective, these are racist attacks?
Well, if you're burning someone out of their home, saying foreigners out, what other word would you use to describe what has been going on?
That's Hilary Benn there. Well, he was on the Today programme on BBC Radio 4, as was the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, who highlighted the challenges social media is presenting for policing social disorder.
We saw, didn't we, a couple of summers ago on the back of the awful incident in Southport, how commentary online drove some of that disorder that summer. And one of the points I would make is that's not simply about free speech within the UK. That's also malign actors overseas. We saw bot farms influencing this as well. So this is quite a difficult issue where other countries want to sow disorder on the streets of the UK. So it's really complex. So we pay a lot of attention to that. We've got established ways with government and other agencies to sort of monitor that. And of course, we're ready for any disorder, but it is challenging. I mean, seeing the apparent targeting of homes of ethnic minorities in Northern Ireland with some of that arson, etc. That looks ghastly.
That's Sir Mark Rowley there. Well, we'll be live in Belfast in a moment, but first let's speak to Joanne Devlin-True, a lecturer in the School of Criminology, Politics and Social Policy at Ulster University, who also joins me from Belfast. Good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. There's a lot of questions to go through. One of the first things I wanted to ask you is, who do you understand are the people behind these riots, these masked men? Is there any sense that we know who they are?
There's been some reporting on BBC Ulster, that's BBC Northern Ireland, this morning about that. I wouldn't really want to speculate on that because I think the jury is out. The police are doing the investigation. We know that several people, again, last night were arrested. There were quite a few people arrested the first night. But what we do know about the profile of those that are kind of going around and in some cases actually knocking on doors and asking people to leave their house or demanding that people leave their houses are male, masked, and probably relatively young on the for the most part, and that of course brings other concerns with that for young people who become involved in fall afoul of the criminal justice system. This has lifelong implications for their futures.
And can you tell us more about the areas that we have seen some of these violent demonstrations erupt and what that tells you about perhaps the politics of Belfast?
Well, I suppose the areas are predominantly what one would have kind of assumed were mostly working class areas, or historically would have been working class areas. But I'm not sure what that can say about the actual, who the perpetrators are, what the flavour is of all of this. Some of this, of course, has been generated, and we know because the posts are in social media have been stoked from outside Northern Ireland as well. So there's essentially, one would have to say, a far right element in this, but it's not only a local far right. In fact, it is very much an international far right.
Can you tell us more about that then? What do you mean by that? So outside groups organising for people to come in, is that your feeling?
Well, we've had these same activities, even in recent weeks, protests in England and so on, by far-right groups led by specific actors who I won't name, but we all know who we're talking about. But there's also international actors who, the Hope Not Hate organization, for example, documents every year in their annual report quite specifically these groups and any links for these groups, even in places like Northern Ireland specifically. So there is a network of worldwide of far right activism that borders on, for which really anti-migrant and anti-Islam are probably the two primary underpinning rationales, if you will.
Okay, Dr. Johann Devlin True, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts there.
Thank you.
Well, let's speak to our correspondent, Louise Cullen, who is on the ground for us in Belfast. Louise, just tell us what people are saying to you this morning. Another night of horrendous violence.
Yes, absolutely. People in this area, it's been quite quiet this morning with the bad weather and so on, but people have been out walking dogs, jogging. People have described it as senseless. They've described it as disgusting. But the clean-up operation behind me there, you can see all the debris from the road has now been cleared away, apart from the pieces that have melted into the tarmac when bins were set on fire. But public transport is back to normal. Traffic is coming and going and flowing very well along here now. But people have now endured 2 nights of this, albeit last night not on the scale of Tuesday night. They will be worried and are worried that will this be a third night? We simply don't know at this stage, but they'll be watching very carefully to see what happens in the course of today and later on this evening.
Louise, you know the city well. I wonder if you could just tell us a bit more about the areas where we've seen most of the rioting.
Well, we've seen that in various places. This obviously is the outskirts of Belfast, Glengormley. This is a relatively mixed area, to be honest. But then in Belfast, where we saw it in East Belfast, that would be a loyalist area, certainly very strongly unionist. And what we have seen in recent years is in some of those areas that perhaps migrants have been housed there or have moved into the area, people in those areas say they're seeing what they describe as a culture change. For the rest of Belfast, of Northern Ireland, we know that Northern Ireland doesn't have as much immigration really as other parts of the UK. The census suggests that Northern Ireland is around 97% white. So we know that the issues that are being raised and that are preying on people's minds, they're similar to what is going on elsewhere in the UK. But we are not as exposed to immigration here as other parts of the UK have been in the past.
Indeed, and how much has race hate crime risen in recent years? I was talking to someone yesterday who said that the stats show that it's actually been going up, despite, of course, as you say, it's not as diverse as other parts of the UK.
Yes, that is something that police figures would show, that race-related crime has increased. But then, of course, there have been arrests as a result of this violence, which is not necessarily that same thing. So we've had that appeal from the police this morning looking for identification of 2 individuals, with doubtless more images to come from up exposure. But as you say, yes, risk-related crime has increased in Northern Ireland. The figures show that. But then again, as I say, that immigration level in Northern Ireland is lower than it is elsewhere in the UK.
And just very briefly, is the sense that there's going to be more violence, more riots overnight tonight? What is the mood on the ground?
There's no doubt there's a heightened sense of awareness that it is a possibility. There is perhaps an anxiety that it is a possibility. People will be watching very carefully to see what happens in the course of today. It's very poor weather today, different to the last couple of days. That may play a role as well. People will be watching social media, they'll be listening to the news, they'll be heeding what comes from the police and from the politicians in the course of today. Will people be leaving work early? Time will tell. Will schools close? We simply just don't know yet. But everybody is on a sense of certainly, if not high alert, then certainly heightened alert.
OK, thank you so much, Louise Cullen there. I should just say that we do have a live page on the BBC News website which has some really useful and important updates. I'm reading one here. The trade union Unison says it's been helping terrified health workers from overseas they're receiving reports that some are being followed to and from work. The regional secretary of Unison's told our colleagues at Good Morning Ulster that when that horrific incident happened in North Belfast on Monday, of course, that attack which left someone without the sight in one one eye. They saw a call to arms on social media, and they said, we knew immediately that our members from overseas were going to be under threat. She says yesterday evening, a nurse with a different skin colour was chased into the Ulster hospital by 4 masked men. There's more accounts of the violence and the riots last night on the BBC News website, as we say there.